Welcome to the panel discussion of the award's 10 best engines. We've picked the winners now for 2013, and I have several of the editors from Ward's Auto here with us to talk about our selections. We've got, of course, 10 fine engines this year. We have V6s, we have a V8, we have a lot of four cylinders, of course. The list this year so far, the Audi S5, which has the 3-liter supercharged V6, the BMW 328i, which has a 2-liter turbo, the BMW 135IS, which is the 3-liter turbocharged V6, the N55 engine, also the Cadillac ATS 2-liter turbo, the 4-cylinder, of course, and then also the Ford Focus ST 2-liter turbo, which is also in the Taurus, so it's kind of a joint award in that case. And then, of course, the Ford Shelby GT500 V8, which is a 5.8-liter supercharged. The Honda Accord 3.5-liter V6, also another Honda Accord engine, the 2.4-liter direct injection 4-cylinder. The Ram 1500, which has the 3.6-liter Pentastar V6, and then also the Subaru BRZ, which has the 2-liter Boxer engine, the FA engine in that small little coupe. So we're going to talk about the engines now, and so we're just kind of going to go in alphabetical order. We're going to start out with the Audi S5, and I'm going to throw it over to Drew Winter to talk about the S5 and why it is that this engine belongs back on the list this year.
Well, I mean, it's the 4th year on the list. We all like this engine, and it satisfies all the key criteria for being a 10 best engine. It's powerful, it's power dense, it features advanced technology like supercharging, it's efficient, it gets fuel economy, and it's just a lot of fun to drive. My only reservations this year about the engine were that it is going to be the 4th time on the list. We've had engines go as many as, something like 13 years on the list.
14 years on the VQ.
But what the VQ did, and what engines that stay on the list usually do, is we see improvements from them on a regular basis, if not annually. Every other year there's a pretty significant technology improvement or a horsepower or torque boost or something along those lines. We haven't seen that from this engine. And so I've been a little bit disappointed. I mean, I understand why Audi has this great package now, so it's if it isn't broke, don't fix it. But with the pace of technology that's going on right now, I mean, I don't think it's wise for us to just let some of these great engines just kind of sit on their laurels when there's all these other great new types of engines vying for a spot on the list.
Well, this engine started out this car started out with a V8 engine, went to a V6, and still maintained a power presence. So maybe to stay on the list, they should go to a 4-cylinder and maintain the power presence. That would certainly be amazing if they could do that.
Well, if they can make 333 horsepower from a 4-cylinder engine, then I'm fully on board with it. But you know, to Drew's point, yeah, I think we were all thinking that, okay, the Audi S5 is going to have a hard time staying on the list this year because the engine's been around. But in this case, you know, I was blown away yet again. You know, yet again, driving this engine, it definitely holds its own against everything that was new in the marketplace that we that we evaluated. I was thinking that the Jaguar, which also has a 3-liter supercharged V6 in the XF, I thought that was going to do really well in the competition. And as I drove it back to back with that, with the S5, it was just no competition. I mean, I would take that Audi any day. So.
Yeah, and the Audi does, one of the other things that we like in 10 best engines is versatility, and certainly again, the Audi engine has proven that. We've had it in the S5, we've had it in the S4,
the A7, the A6, it's in the A8.
And it's also showed up, the same engine shows up on other Volkswagen platforms as well. I think we see it in a Porsche hybrid and some others. So it really is a versatile engine. It's a lot of fun to drive, so it's a great engine. I'd just like to see maybe next year that they tweak it a little, and make life more interesting.
If it can still beat everything that's new next year, then I'm fine with it. But yeah, like you say, it's got to beat what what comes along that's new. So now the next engine is the BMW 328i, which is a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder. Was first on the list last year. We drove it last year in the Z4 and also in the 5 Series, and now this year we drive it in the 328i with an 8-speed automatic, which I will say made all the difference in the world, I think, compared to the other 2-liter turbos that were in the competition. We were easily doing 28 miles per gallon in a BMW 3 Series with all sorts of horsepower and torque, 240 horsepower to be precise. Thoughts on that engine?
I thought you were right about the transmission. It helped with the fuel economy, and you've heard for years that anything past 6 gears, you get diminishing returns. But with the BMW, it seems like that's not exactly the case. So, you know, you have an engine that's you know, that much fun to drive with that kind of fuel economy. It's the best of both worlds. I think it worked really well in that package.
Absolutely.
Also a controversial stop-start system.
That's right.
And, you know, that had us going for a while, talking in the hallway, because it is not a hybrid-like stop-start system. It's real smooth, and you hardly notice it. The engine just feels like it's starting and stopping like a regular car. So it's a little disconcerting, but, you know, I noticed, though, the car is so quiet as it is, it kind of kind of amplifies the fact that it's
not one of the best stop-start systems on the market, hybrid or not. It needs some refinement, I think.
I think that there's you know, an emerging European characteristics to stop-start. You know, Europe has been doing stop-start for a long time. They love it there. Yet there's a kind of a jarring sensation each time that it's triggered. In almost every European car I've driven, and I'm not sure why that is, but compared to some of the other, you know, like the Ford Fusion hybrid and you know, the Toyota hybrids, those are much more seamless. And I'm sure that it's only a matter of time before, you know, especially in a German luxury car, where we would see stop-start being much more seamless.
Well, how seamless do you want to go with stop-start? I mean, the car is starting and stopping, so there's going to, I mean, you have to expect some reaction on the part of the vehicle.
Nope, you want it imperceptible.
I think that's an American taste thing, that you know, the difference between the European
It is, but that's what we're used to, because that's how Toyota has trained most of the U.S. market to accept that sort of thing. You know, I mean, it's taken them 10 or 12 years to get the Prius, you know, to the state of tune today, and it's, you know, it's very seamless. And same with the Volt. I mean, I'd say the same thing about the Volt. So I don't think we're being unreasonable.
But as are, you know, hybrid, electrified vehicles, it's different because sometimes you're in electric-only mode, or, you know, where it's quiet. You're used to that. So, you know, the transition's not like I think you mentioned, Steve. It's not as abrupt because you are stopping and starting, but you know, it's an internal combustion engine versus the mixture of the electrified powertrain in the engine. So.
Yep. All right, so we're going to move on down the list. The BMW 135 IS, which had the N55 3-liter inline-6 turbo. This is the 3rd year on the list for this engine. We tested it last year in, I think it was in the 3 Series. So this year, the fact that this engine is available in a smaller car in the 1 Series, and up until now, the state of tune only went up to 300 horsepower and 300 foot-pounds of torque, and now in this 1 Series, 320 horsepower, 317 pound-feet of torque, which just makes this little car, you know, just an absolute rocket ship. 2 doors, barely a back seat, lightweight, and just all sorts of fun to drive. Anybody want to comment on the 1 Series?
Well, there's just no substitute for an inline-6. I mean, it's nothing sounds like it. And BMW is one of the few auto companies around to still have an inline-6, and they're keeping it because it's part of their brand character, because it sounds so great. So that's one I can forgive them keeping sort of the old architecture and the technology, because it's a beautiful thing to behold when you get that engine singing.
So you're not ready to see that one go off the list.
Well, you know, BMW is pretty good at making more regular updates than we've seen on the Audi so far.
Yep. Okay, moving on to the Cadillac ATS 2-liter turbo. Highest specific output engine that we've ever had in the competition at 272 horsepower, which means 136 horsepower per liter, which is astonishing. Last year, of course, this engine, or I should say an earlier generation of this engine, made 270, so 135 pound-feet of torque, and so, I'm sorry, 135 horsepower per liter, sorry. So, I mean, GM is able to raise the bar yet again, and actually in this engine there's a reduction in torque from the version that we tested last year. So fuel economy has improved. Torque is a little bit, I mean, from a seat of pants evaluation, you can notice the torque is a little bit leaner, but still fabulous package. I know, Drew, you're a big fan of the ATS application of that engine.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what GM's been able to do, and particularly in the past couple of years, in terms of getting big power out of small engines. And the engines are also very refined and very fuel efficient. And again, it's a great addition to a car like the ATS. Suddenly, you're getting a lighter engine, and frankly, I would rather have a lighter engine and a more balanced car than having a more powerful, heavier engine weighing down the front end when I'm driving it.
Well, and GM also said that the torque curve that you spoke of being even out, they did that intentionally for that specific car. They thought that would work good on a Cadillac. I'm impressed, and not to harken back too far, but we all remember the or maybe some of us don't, but the 1981 Cadillac Cimarron,
yeah,
4-liter or 4-cylinder, and that was 88 horsepower. This is 272. That's kind of apples and oranges, but it shows that it took 31 years, but GM finally has put a decent engine in a small Cadillac.
But the question is, the ultimate question with that is it BMW competitor now? I mean, that's what they made it for. There's their objective from the beginning, and you know, that's what the consumers are ultimately going to decide. But I would say it's getting there.
It's darn close.
Yeah, it is. It's getting there. They're definitely on the right path.
Yeah.
You know, we had some arguments about the actual NVH and sound, and the fact is, even the BMW 4-cylinder certainly doesn't sound like the 6-cylinder BMW.
No.
So we had a few arguments there, but I think just GM's really, I think, doing some very serious innovative combustion engineering with some of these new engines it's working on.
Yeah. Well, and also it's worth noting that, you know, 4-cylinder turbo 2-liter engines are basically becoming kind of the strike zone, you know, the meat of the market, you know, in the U.S. So, you know, it's in sports cars like the Ford Focus ST and also in the Hyundai Genesis Coupe, which was another 2-liter turbo that we evaluated. Yeah, these engines, they're everywhere. You know, they're in Explorers and they're in luxury cars, European and domestic. For me, the big difference between the 2-liter and the BMW and the ATS is, again, that transmission. That 8-speed transmission in the BMW gave us about a 5-mile-per-gallon gain in our evaluations over the ATS, although, you know, I still consider that ATS to be extremely competitive. Speaking of the Ford Focus ST, that's the other 2-liter turbo that's on the list this year. We also had it in the Taurus, which is astounding that an engine that small can move a car that large. So yeah, 252 horsepower in the Focus ST application. Byron, you want to talk about that?
I think you already said it. Having it in the Taurus as well. I mean, that's a full-size sedan and in a seat car, sports car. Those are two hugely different segments. And the fact that in the Taurus it didn't feel underpowered at all. I mean, it was a 4,000-pound car, and it moved perfectly well. I had no complaints with it. That's the kind of thing you're going to have to see. You know, you mentioned the engine in the S5, but all that other applications were kind of a sporty kind of application. With the 2-liter in the Focus ST and the Taurus and the Explorer that you mentioned, I mean, it's going from full-size utility vehicles to full-size sedans to a small sporty car. I mean, you know, that's what you have to, you know, to get that, you know, the powertrain commonality and keep costs down, but make it be able to work efficiently and please the consumer in all those different segments. And I think Ford did that with the 2-liter.
Yeah. Ford definitely has it going on with the EcoBoost, I'd have to say. Whether it's the 2-liter, whether it's the 3.5 that shows up in the F-150, you know, all sorts of power, you know, in the pickup truck. Also the 1.6 is a fine engine that didn't make the list this year. And also last week I drove, you know, the 1-liter 3-cylinder EcoBoost engine, which is going to be in contention next year. That's a fine package in the Fiesta.
And what were you getting mileage-wise on that?
I think it was about 39 miles per gallon. And then if you're driving it a little less aggressively, some of us were doing 43 miles per gallon, which is pretty impressive. You know, it's great to see automakers downsizing engines and also downsizing the package that they're in. So they're taking weight out and enabling these these smaller yet power dense engines to to still do the job. So now let's move on to a large engine, the 5.8 liter supercharged V8 that is in the Ford Shelby GT500 at 662 horsepower. We've never tested an engine that is so powerful, and it was a very controversial vote on this, in fact, because some of us were of the mind that maybe too much power for the chassis, too much power for the tires. You could shred rubber in the span of about 6 weeks in a car like this, I think. But Drew, I know you're a big fan of this.
Well, I mean, we all know that V8 engines are going to be they're disappearing.
Life of the market.
But I think we wanted to make the point with this engine is that engineering hasn't stopped on these big V8s. I mean, they're still working to not only make them more powerful, but also more efficient. So this thing makes more horsepower than could blow away some 1960s style dragsters on the racetrack, and still there's no gas guzzler tax, and it gets something like 25 miles per gallon on the highway. I mean, that's a pretty astonishing engineering feat, no matter what. And so that's, I thought it was important that we recognize the folks that worked on this and not treat them like they're, now working on some sort of museum pieces. There is a place in the future for V8 engines. It's a smaller place, but it's still there, and it was still the enthusiasts around here would hopefully see them around for a long time.
Well, that's it. And philosophically, a great engine is a great engine. It shouldn't be disqualified because it's a big engine, right? And what's interesting also is there were some very decent V8s that we considered that came pretty close. This one made the list, but I would also point out it's like 395 torque just off idle, which is like, wow. And I think that's the effect you were getting, that you barely touched the gas.
Well, that was the one complaint that some people had, was it's hard to contain that kind of power.
Right.
But, you can't work miracles. It's 662 horsepower. I mean, what do you
The
expect?
sales are great too, right?
It's
They
selling
sell out.
better than the Ford Mustang Boss 302.
Yeah. Well, they make about 6,500 a year, and they sell them all out.
Oh, yeah, they're probably sold out far in advance, too. I bet people are waiting for them.
So a couple of Hondas that made the list this year, and this is the third time, I believe, since we started this competition 19 years ago that Honda has had two engines in 1 year. In this case, it's two Accord engines, and the first is a 3.5 liter single overhead cam V6 that makes 278 horsepower. We were all really impressed with it, and this is an engine that I've liked for a number of generations just because it's very strong, great step off, great torque, and then also good fuel efficiency. Christy, I think you were impressed with this V6 as well.
I was, and you're right, it's always been a great V6, but we had newer competition in recent years, so it dropped off the list, but they've come back for the 9th generation Accord for the 13 model year and done some changes. The horsepower is up from 271 to 278. They've made the cylinder deactivation system, which they call variable cylinder management, they've made it more useful, or it's available in more useful speed ranges.
Right, it used to be 6, 4, and 3, so it could shut down to 4 cylinders and 3 cylinders at different times, and now instead of that 4-cylinder mode, it's strictly 3-cylinder mode, so you're actually gaining efficiency in that way.
Right. And a big plus for me was I had this car for an entire weekend, so I probably had the most drive time of anybody in the office in this vehicle. The fuel economy exceeded EPA estimates, which is rare for this year's competition. So the EPA combined estimates 25, and we were, I think, close to 30 with our combined driving.
In a strong V6.
In a strong V6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Astounding.
impressive.
It is. And then on the 4-cylinder side, and of course that V6 is also a port injection V6. Most of these new engines that we're seeing are integrating direct injection, but we're also finding that port injection still has some shelf life.
Yeah. And one more point I'd like to make about that V6 is that V6 is in a lot of Honda products. So
right, the minivan and
yeah. So while in midsize sedans V6s might not have that big of a take rate anymore, Honda puts this engine in the Odyssey, not the same engine, but certainly the improvements will probably translate to the next generation Odyssey, Pilot, Ridgeline. There's some Acura applications, so it's in quite a few products.
Okay. And then the other Accord engine was a 2.4 liter direct injection, all new 4-cylinder engine that makes 185 horsepower, in the base Accord, but then there's a 189 horsepower version that's in the Sport, which comes with a 6-speed manual.
With a 6-speed manual.
But the 185 horsepower version comes with a CVT, and it's an all-new CVT. And I'm not a fan of CVTs at all, but boy, I thought this was the best CVT that I had ever driven. Very smooth, very responsive. You don't get those kind of power surges or all those funny noises. I was just really impressed. And then the fuel efficiency is even better in that than with the 6-speed manual.
It is, and a point about that CVT is that's an in-house Honda CVT. As Honda
They don't buy it from
does.
Jatco or anybody else.
They don't buy it from anybody. They do their transmissions in-house, and they've done the CVT in-house. And they learned a lot, certainly, from Japan, where CVTs are prevalent in the really small cars. But this is the first Honda CVT in the U.S., and I think, yeah, they've done a great
It's a
job.
great system. I mean, you don't get that funny feeling where it's searching for the gear. You know, there was a play called 6 Characters in Search of an Author, and usually when you think of CVT, at least the ones we've driven, it's like one car in search of a zillion gears. And this one, you don't have that feeling. I mean, it just is so refined.
Yep.
It can be noisy too. I drove that 2.4 liter for a weekend, and I've driven CVTs before, and either it would take forever to, like you were
The
saying,
rubber
find
band
the key.
effect, yeah.
Yeah, but this one, like I hit the gas and just kept going. I mean, I had no issues with it at all.
Very quiet. All right, and then we're going to move on to the Ram 1500, of course, a full-size pickup truck. There was a time when you didn't want a V6 in a full-size pickup truck, but Ford has found good success with the 3.7-liter V6 in the F-150, and now Ram comes with this excellent Pentastar 3.6-liter that was on our list last year in the Chrysler 300S, I believe it was. And then it was on the list the prior year as well. So this is the 3rd year for the Pentastar engine. And in the case of the Ram, it's making 305 horsepower, which is pretty good power. And again, it's port injection as opposed to DI, so it's, in terms of cost, it's it's a little more affordable. But I think our average fuel economy was 17, 18 miles per gallon, which which isn't phenomenal, but still that engine moves that truck.
Yeah, it's
absolutely
big
effortless.
truck.
Big truck, very big truck, and you don't feel any compromise at all. Lots of great throttle response. And Aaron, what do you think about that one?
Well, I think that was the big surprise of the competition, was that Pentastar V6 in the pickup, whether or not it could move a vehicle that size. And Ram pickups, they come single cab, double cab. I mean, Chrysler is putting this particular engine in a lot of different size Rams. So we know it can move a car, but Chrysler is trying to do this versatile one-engine strategy with the Pentastar V6. So to put it in a pickup truck and move a vehicle that size was a big surprise for a lot of us. It was smooth. It was quiet. It also has that 8-speed transmission in there too. So shifting upward was, it was very easy, very
Responsive.
very responsive,
And
very
I thought
efficient.
that engine was going to have to fight its way onto the list this year, and it was definitely a consensus winner. There was no debate about it.
No argument about that one.
Yeah,
It wasn't
people
remarkable.
very early on were talking about that engine being one of the winners. The positive feedback was there from the get-go, so I wasn't really surprised that it made the list. But
Well, it's another example of a really versatile engine. I mean, it's great in the luxury, basically a luxury car in the 300. Even in an all-wheel drive application, and it's tuned a little differently, and it sounds just powerful and luxurious. And then you put it into the pickup truck, it sounds more grunty, and it looks like it's been there were tweaks made to the transmission settings and everything. So but it just felt like a real grunty pickup truck.
Yeah.
In this case, it was very smooth and refined, but still had a lot of the torque that gave you confidence that you could pull a lot of stuff with it.
well, and as Aaron said, the question from the beginning was, can this engine power this big truck? And the answer
Well,
right
it powers
from the
it
start was yes.
easily
Yeah.
too, without effort, and that could be a serious competitor to the Ford with the EcoBoost engine in the V6 segment there, which is increasingly being picked by pickup buyers, which I never thought I'd see.
Well, see, I consider that a totally different beast. I don't consider the Ford 3.5 EcoBoost to be a competitor for the
turbo?
Pentastar, because those twin turbos, I mean, it's not even a competition in terms of horsepower and torque. I mean, the Ford engine wins hands down. I guess I consider the more relevant competitor to be the 3.7
3.7,
base engine, which is also a very capable engine. So yeah, Chrysler doesn't really have that V6 turbo competitor for the EcoBoost
Not yet.
just yet. Last engine on the list, the Subaru BRZ 2-liter boxer engine, the FA version, which is a high output version. It's 100 horsepower per liter. Tell me another 2-liter engine that's naturally aspirated that makes 100 horsepower per liter. I mean, there's, you just can't find them in the United States. So just a great package. As I said earlier, small engine, small, very power-dense engine in a small, lightweight package. 2-seater with barely two more seats in back, maybe room for a couple of duffel bags. But light curb weight, very low curb weight, and this is a very advanced engine, and just moves this vehicle so well. And of course, next year now, there's going to be a turbo version of this engine that is going to come that does integrate direct injection. And first, we're going to see it in the Forester, and then who knows what we're going to see in it, see it next. But Subaru BRZ, Christy, you want to talk about that one at all?
It's a great engine. This vehicle was a long time coming to market. It's a collaboration with Subaru and Toyota. Toyota has their own version, the Scion FRS, here in the U.S. And I think it's everything they promised. It's a light, fun sports car, really tossable. Engine is, the first thing that came to mind when I drove this engine a year ago in Japan was civilized. I mean, I expected some really harsh, sporty, typically sporty driving experience. And
sometimes the Subaru Boxers have been kind of raspy, a little too noisy, but they seem to have dealt with it well here.
I mean, you can, this car is just at home in a subdivision, 20 miles per hour as it is, screaming down the freeway. So
you're not sacrificing the refinement for the sport.
But it has two different personalities, like you said. I mean, if you can wind out the gears in this car, and there's a lot. I mean, that's where the fun's to be had, I thought. I mean, that car reminds me of kind of, remember the S2000 Honda had out? It's just
only a lot more civilized.
Yeah, I guess you could say
and you
that.
don't have to cane it to 8,000 RPM to get it going.
No, but it's a lot of fun, and I think Christy's right. I mean, you can live with this car every day, and I think, but you could still have a lot of fun with it, and I expect this to be a big hit with the aftermarket crowd.
Yeah.
And we should point out, it's in the Scion as well, as you know, but we're giving the award to Subaru because it's a Subaru engine.
Because it's a Subaru engine, in addition, not only is it a Subaru engine and transmission, but also the fuel injection system does come from Toyota, because Toyota has a very unique both port injection and direct injection system that was on the V6, from Lexus.
Belt and suspenders.
Yeah, belt and suspenders approach to fuel injection.
Now we're talking.
Yes, Toyota did contribute in that sense, but overall for the vehicle package, Toyota contributed more in terms of outside of the engine. So we consider this to be a Subaru, powertrain program. So they are primarily getting the award. So.
And turbocharging might come to this engine. They're not totally discounting it. So.
No, it is. That's the version.
Well, for the car, for this car, for the BRZ.
Oh, for this. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that would make a lot of sense. I would think that the first sports car that would get this turbo version would be like the WRX, because they're due to put out a new Impreza WRX, and then the STI. So maybe we see a staged rollout there. So that's our 10, and we're down to our last 5 minutes. So this is your chance to cry in your beer about those engines that didn't make the list. Those engines that were close, but just kind of got just kind of nudged aside for whatever reason. Anybody want to?
And we did how many engines?
40? 40 engines in total.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's
40 engines in total. There were three. There were 3 electric vehicles, just straight battery, pure electrics. There were 8 hybrids, which means hybrids plus plug-in hybrids, and then there was 1 5-cylinder, which was the Volvo S60.
Well, maybe we can chat a little about why none of the, plug-ins
green
and
cars made it.
Sure.
Yeah, the green cars.
I think real-world fuel economy was disappointing. Real-world range. I know with the Fit EV, which was rated quite highly, almost made the list. Because of the temperatures, we were cutting the range in half, essentially. We had the range cut in half for us. So instead of getting 80 miles on a full charge, we were getting like 40-some. So that was a pretty big disappointment. And then I think with the plug-ins, Drew and I had talked about, there's a dual personality to these cars. They're one thing in electric mode, and then they're a totally different thing in hybrid or engine-only mode.
I thought
so
the C-Max did pretty well, though. The plug-in C-Max. Did you? That was
I did not get into that one.
Yeah,
that was
it was good, but they all seem to have sort of this mode where, you know, when the battery's charged, you have your sort of 15, 20 miles of fun, and then it's like the party's over, you know, and then suddenly everything starts to go back to just feeling like a regular
But I'm okay
hybrid.
with that. See, I'm okay with that. I mean, you know, it's not going to work for everybody, but I live close to the office, and I could literally drive that car probably 2 days without even charging and never use the gasoline engine. I drove that the other day, and I merged onto the freeway, and I wanted to see, okay, how fast can I go without ever consuming a drop of, you know, fuel. So accelerated the way I would just, you know, in any other car. Certainly not wide open throttle, but I got it up to 80 miles per hour in pure electric mode, and I was keeping up with traffic just fine out on 696, which is a raceway. So I really thought it was an excellent you know, effort. And
My only complaint with that car is when I plugged it in to charge it, it blew out my Christmas lights.
well, then turn off
I
some
got
of
a
the
lot of
Christmas
Christmas
lights.
lights.
Sounds like a
Clark
National
Griswold over
Lampoon.
here.
But you know, I think that this is also these plugins. These are early first generations of, you know, we drove the Toyota, the Prius plug-in and the C-Max. You know, I think they're only going to get better and better, and the range is going to be extended, and the, you know, the dual personality you mentioned, I think it's going to be blended a little bit more. And I think, you know, for first generation, I think they're phenomenal
They'll
already.
expand to 50 states. That was an issue as well with the Fit EV, is that it's limited
Yep.
where it's sold. So
You know, I was very disappointed that the Volkswagen Jetta Hybrid didn't
Yes.
make the list.
And I didn't have to pay you to say that, did I? Wow.
Well, no, it's because I've driven almost all the hybrids in the competition, and the Jetta Hybrid was the only one that I felt had the nice combination of fuel economy and power. Some of the hybrids had the greater fuel economy, but you're on the freeway and you're trying to accelerate and you don't feel like you're going anywhere.
You're right.
The other thing was with the Jetta Hybrid, I like the sound of the engine. Like sometimes hybrids, they can have a little bit of extra, or you know, they don't have that growl, or they have, you know, I felt like I was driving a normal, not a normal car, but a car without the hybrid technology. It just felt like a great car to me. So
Tell me, name for me another hybrid that has a 7-speed dual clutch transmission and a 1.4-liter turbocharged engine that makes great horsepower. I think overall system horsepower is something like 188 horsepower. I mean, that is a good number for a small car like that. And I was really, you know what, as I mentioned earlier about the stop-start system, I think that's what doomed the Jetta Hybrid. You know, it's that European
Regen
stop-start
braking was
system.
horrible.
You know, the regen braking
Yeah,
was
horrible.
it was.
The brakes are
Stop-start was a
grabby.
little-
The
yeah.
brakes are grabby. In fact, I asked the engineers at Volkswagen about that, and that was deliberate, because the grabbier the brakes, the more they're able to regenerate you know, energy back to the battery. So you know, there's a fuel economy reason for that, as much as some drivers might not like it. But
fuel economy wasn't all that great.
No, it
though.
wasn't. That
I
was
mean,
what
I
we
think
were- yeah.
the turbo engine was fantastic. I think
Yeah.
as a hybrid, the car doesn't
Right.
live up to the promise.
You're like, why is a hybrid? What name another hybrid that has a turbo? You know, no, there's a reason that other ones don't have it.
If I want a fast car that gets good gas mileage, I'll just get a gasoline car.
Yeah, it's sort of
There
the
you
same
go.
thing that doomed the Honda CRZ, where it's like it's two divergent things and it's just too much for one.
Yeah, it doesn't know what it wants to be.
Yeah.
any other things for the lightning round that anybody wants to talk about?
I was kind of, I like the Fiat 500 Abarth. It was a lot of fun, and I thought that engine really did transform the vehicle. I mean, it, you know, too often you hear the word cute with that car, and with a nice loud engine that has quite a bit of power. It was fun, and they did a good job, but as we discussed, it's perhaps not good enough to be a 10 best engine.
Byron?
I thought
I love that car,
it
dude.
felt fast, but I think that's because it's low to the ground. Like I said, I looked up some 0 to 60 numbers. There's a Toyota Camry. That's the V6 Toyota Camry. That's faster than that car. And everybody talked about the exhaust note, and I think it had a throaty exhaust, but it just came too much into the cabin. There wasn't much sound deadening. I just think it's still a bit unrefined.
My first impression was it sounds like a V8. It has the power of a V6 in a tiny 4-cylinder package. And then I drove it a second and third time, and it doesn't quite sound like a Mustang GT.
No.
I mean, it's entertaining, but you start to think, I think this muffler is, has a hole in it. Or I think something came amiss in the exhaust stream. So fascinating times. Well,
Well, in the old Fiats, it probably would have a hole. So at least we're coming that far with it.
that wraps up our discussion about the 2013 Ward's 10 Best Engines competition. Thank you for joining us.